Hey everybody, how you doing? Well, that's good. Welcome to PHLY Flyers presented by Mortgage CS. Check out mortgagecs.com/PHLY to start your home buying process today. Company NMLS ID number 1464766. My name is Bill Matz. I'm your director of fun and games for the evening. Joining me as always, Philadelphia's #1 hockey beat reporter. It is Charlie O'Connor. Coming up in a little bit, simply because I am awesome at knowing the schedule, we will show you part one of an interview Charlie did one-on-one with Bob Rotruck. It's going to be some good stuff, and it's part of us kind of trying to take a step back today. The Flyers are off till next Tuesday. We can actually maybe focus a little bit on the bigger picture, a little bit on the future, the rebuild, all that good stuff. Before we throw to the interview in a few minutes, Charlie, just how was it talking to Bob?
Yeah, it was great talking to Bob. Bob, obviously, if you're not aware, he is the play-by-play and a commentator, announcer, whatever you want to call it, for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Look, I've made it very clear on this show when we've been asked about how's this guy on the Phantoms doing? How's that guy on the Phantoms doing? Look, I can take a look at the stat sheet.
I look at the game logs now and then.
I can look at the numbers. Yeah. I can say, okay, that's about what I expected this guy to do. That's less than what I expect him to be producing right now. I do not have time to watch all the Phantoms games. I just don't. I'm covering the Flyers. There's really no way I can produce the show and written content that you all hopefully love so much, while also setting aside time to watch 40 Phantoms games as well. So when I'm asked, I tend to defer to the people I talk to on a regular basis who do watch the Phantoms nightly. Bob is one of those people. Not only does he watch the Phantoms, he calls the Phantoms. He's around the team. So I thought, hey, if we're going to talk about the Phantoms and we're going to evaluate the prospects there, the team as a whole, where they stand going into their second half as well, why not ask the person who's around the team as much as anyone? So we got Bob. Bob is always a good interview. He always has a ton of information to share, which is why we had to cut this up into two parts, because we just got into talking, and it turned out that what I thought was originally going to be a 10 to 20-minute interview turned into about a 40-minute interview. So part one will be today. Part two will be tomorrow. This one is going to focus a little bit more on the bigger picture and some of the highest profile prospects that are currently in the organization. I'm talking about the guys that have spent significant time in the NHL or are, let's say, the top prospect down there.
The guys whose names you know.
The guys who, yeah, exactly. Like the top prospect in the AHL right now for the Flyers, I think we both would probably agree, not counting Bobby Brink because he's no longer he's no longer even a prospect. Like, even if he spends the rest of the year in the AHL, this is his Calder Trophy season. He's no longer a prospect. He will not be on our prospect list when we do it next month because he's not a prospect anymore. He's an NHLer. Yes, he's down in the AHL, but to me, the best prospect down there, Samu Tuomala. We will be talking to Bob about him. But before we get into the interview, I do want to have a conversation more high level about the AHL guys that we have seen at the NHL level. So specifically, we mentioned him a second ago, Bobby Brink recently sent down, goes down to the minors, has 3 goals in 2 games. He's doing exactly what you want him to do after being sent down. It doesn't seem like he's sulking.
It's not the Wade Allison. Well, he's on the 4th line, and he hasn't scored yet. Like, he has scored at this point, but those first couple of weeks, everyone reported pretty rough.
And we will actually, when we talk to Bob in a few minutes, we will get into Wade Allison as well. But Bobby Brink gets sent down, immediately starts lighting up the score sheet. Bill, I guess I want to ask you the question straight up. Was it the right decision to send him down?
I mean, you see their record since they sent him down? No, listen. I know we always joke like, well, he wasn't getting the time, and it's like, well, they could just give it to him. Like it's always the hot dog costume. We're looking for the coach can just play him more.
Sure could have,
but that's clearly like he's not going to play a guy who he feels, whether it's his play in games, whether it's his practice habits, which I think were alluded to at one point.
Yeah,
whatever
it wasn't even alluded to. He straight up said it.
whatever it is that resulted in his ice time going, like the game before he started getting 12 or fewer minutes every night, he played almost 18. So whatever led to him getting a 6 minute a game reduction in ice time, that's a few shifts a period. We're not talking about like, oh, well, he's down to 15. Like, no, he averaged under 11 for the final 6 games he was in the NHL. Mm-hmm. Like whatever led to that, you're hoping like, okay, he just takes the right attitude to the AHL and like produces. So number one, like we've said time and time again, you can do all the little shit you want. Guys like Brink, Forster, the end of the day, they're going to need to produce points in order to have that cemented place in the NHL. 2024, Brink had no points in the AHL or in the NHL. Yeah. Goes down immediately. He's producing points. Now we heard last year while he was producing in the AHL, it was like, yeah, he's hurt. It doesn't look great, but like he's showing up on the score sheet because he's that good. I'm wondering if you kind of get into that a little with Bob in the interview. I'm looking forward to hearing what he had to say about Brink. But right move to send him down. I guess if he's just not going to get the playing time here, the number one thing is his development.
I actually think it was the right move. I am very much in favor of sending him down, especially to me. The big reason why is, look, I think that Bobby Brink should be playing over Nick Delorier. But it wasn't even really just that. Yeah. Now, it's the fact that they have so many defensemen. Like right now, there's just a roster lineup logjam basically ever since the Jamie Drysdale trade. And I don't have a problem with that. Like, hey, you're trying to get the best for Cutter Gauthier. You're in a weird situation. You have the chance to get a guy with top pair potential. Sure, get Jamie Drysdale now and figure it out down the road. But I do think that where Bobby Brink has fallen into is that, especially with Noah Cates coming back, especially with the fact that they're expecting Owen Tippett will be back from his injury after the All-Star break, like if you're going to roll with 7 defensemen on a lot of these nights because you just have so many guys that need to play for various reasons, I don't know if Bobby Brink really does have a spot right now, especially given the fact that, look, for most of the first half of the season, John Tortorella had his in case of emergency bench Morgan Frost button. Morgan Frost, A, is playing very well. B, I think has earned himself. I think Torts has put that button in his desk. It's in a drawer. He can still break it out if he wants to.
The glass has been rebuilt around it at least.
Yes, exactly. There's not just a bunch of shattered glass from him slamming the thing. Like Frost has earned himself a little leeway, and because of that, there's just fewer spots in the lineup for Bobby Brink. What I want to see Brink do, and so far he's been doing it, is just go down there and crush it. Because we talked about this over the summer, even leading into camp, that while Brink put up points in the second half of last season, he didn't look that great. He was still coming back from the hip surgery. He didn't look fully healthy. He racked up points because he's got great vision and he's a good playmaker, but he didn't look good. I want him to go down there and look good for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long it is. I think this logjam is going to resolve itself, whether it's going to be because a couple of guys get hurt or more likely it's going to be because they trade away some guys at the deadline. Once the logjam gets resolved, get Brink back up here. But in the short term, I don't have a problem at all with having him go down to the minors and tear it up for a few weeks, get his confidence back up, and then when you bring him back up, he's feeling like he can take on the world.
Do you think the demotion was more based on maybe him hitting some sort of rookie wall? We talked about with that. We talked about that with Forster, maybe his play dipping a bit there with Brink. Do you think it was more that, or perhaps, as it was, like you said, not even alluded to, outright said, his practice habits? Did he get maybe a little too comfortable?
It's an interesting question. I don't want to speculate one way or the other because I don't want to be questioning the guy's character. My guess is that when John Tortorella talks about practice habits, I don't think he necessarily means, man, he's dogging it out there. He's not trying. I think John Tortorella has a very high bar for what he considers to be strong practice habits. And yeah, maybe Bobby Brink got a little complacent because he started thinking, I don't have to go out there every day and be doing everything I can to impress the coach. And maybe John Tortorella looks at it as, no, you do. You very much do. You haven't earned anything yet. Yeah, you're in the NHL, but I do not view you. He actually straight up said this.
You're not cemented.
Yeah, he said this a few weeks before the demotion, that Bobby Brink is not yet cemented himself as a full-time NHLer. He's in the NHL. He's holding his own, but he's not a full-time NHLer the same way that, even somebody who's struggling like Scott Laughton. Scott Laughton is a full-time
He's an
NHLer.
NHL player.
He's earned it. Bobby Brink, in Tortorella's mind, has not yet proven over a large sample size that he is an every night has to be there NHLer. And I think maybe they were hoping for him to start trying to show them he deserves it more. And maybe they just didn't quite see it. Like, look, we talked about in the past about how you have to show up to training camp in incredible shape to survive a Torts camp. That expectation holds the rest of the season. Maybe I don't think it's that they think Brink is lazy. I just think that they want to see Brink maybe be just like taking practices as seriously as humanly possible. And instead, he maybe thinks, I don't have to go balls to the wall every day like I did in September and October and November. And they're like, nah, you do.
When your bar is made the team because of an outstanding effort in preseason and training camp, that's why you're here. Like,
yeah.
And honestly, if it wasn't, well, Forster has to make it, and we can't have him make it without this dude who totally outplayed him throughout the preseason.
Yeah.
Like, Brink was here. It's felt like as a surprise to everyone, and almost like, well, we can't have Forster without him, and we really want Forster. So it was always seemed maybe a little precarious.
Yeah.
And then once it dipped, it was like time. But I'm looking forward to finding out what happens after some defensemen are traded, maybe. Like, does Ula Lixell? I did it right.
You did?
Does
Bill.
Ula Lixell stay? Like, is Brink the next guy up when there's an injury? Or is it going to be a Tuomala? Is it going to be someone else? Maybe a more established guy like a Cooper Marody, is just because, he's got a little bit of experience. But we'll see how it goes. What happens next is the most interesting thing to me. And obviously we have no answers on that because it's the future. Since I mentioned Lixell, kind of like what I've seen out of him since they've brought him up. He's had a few chances. One of the few guys the last couple of nights who's like actually stood out.
Yeah,
now
he's
like low bar, like standing out when when only one guy scores over 2 games. Like, it's not that hard to stand out, I wouldn't say.
I didn't even realize that. Yeah, because Forster had both the goals. They got shut out.
Goals. Yeah. And I don't think they scored a ton in the game. Like, there haven't been much in the last
it's
3
been a
games.
Go for the Flyers. Yeah.
But Lixell hasn't looked out of place. I've liked what I want to see more. But just a guy who's made a few things happen on a few games where not much else has happened. That's what I've seen out of him.
I think he's been noticeable, and that's a big step over where he was the last time he got an extended look, which was last season. He had that one game where he had fewer than 10 minutes against Arizona. This season, probably shouldn't even have played, but Ryan Palin got sick, so he jumps in. I'm comparing this Lixell to the one we saw last season when he got an actual extended audition. I think this version looks more noticeable. He's trying more things. We talked about this on the post game after the loss to the Bruins. He's got 7 shots on goal in his last 2 games. That's a positive. He got a secondary assist on the second Tyson Forrester goal, so he's got a point. He's got something to pin himself to in terms of the score sheet. My big question with Lixell, and this is going to remain my question with him until he either makes it clear that he's an NHL caliber player, or is the Flyers make it clear he's no longer really in the mix, aside from just being an injury call up, which maybe. I just wonder if he is something of a tweener, where he very clearly can score at the AHL level. He's got 28 points in 34 games this year. He had 45 and 53 last year. He is a good AHL point producer, undeniably. I do not know if he can be a good NHL point producer. And if he can't be a good NHL point producer, I don't think I see him as a 4th line.
That's especially considering, now you can say, well, why can't we just have a skilled 4th line? Good question. What we're seeing is, like, we think we know who's going to be a 4th, like the type of guy who's going to be a 4th liner on this team is just different than what maybe a Lixell, if that's all he is. Like, what exactly are you gonna be? Like, we know Forster, like, he's gonna have to score. He's gonna have to do, like, Brink. You're gonna have to put up points, man. Like, if Lixell isn't a top 9 guy, is he gonna be able to adapt his game to what this coaching staff wants a fourth liner to be?
Exactly.
Like I think that's the big question with him going forward. And maybe he just starts to put up a ton of points.
I don't, and I'm of the opinion that I know a lot of people get critical of the Flyers. It's like, well, they just make their fourth liners traditional fourth liners. To me, it's less about that you have to be physical and all that stuff. It's more about, if you're going to be an NHL fourth liner, can you succeed in 10 minutes a night? Can you provide value in a limited role? Because most scorers, not all, but most scorers need more minutes in order to get themselves into a game.
Everybody but Joel Farabee, apparently.
Everybody but Joel Farabee. Yeah. But seriously, and even Joel Farabee, he's still getting 16 to 18 minutes a night.
He's not playing fourth line minutes.
Yeah. My point is that it's a lot easier if your role as a fourth liner is you're going to go in hard on the forecheck and create havoc and just muck shit up. It's a lot easier to do that because you could theoretically do that on pretty much every shift. Whereas if you're a scorer, sometimes for scorers, it can, you have to take risks in order to score points, generally speaking. That's just the way it goes. You have to be willing to have a turnover, maybe, flub a pass, you misfire on a shot or something. If you're getting 15 plus minutes a night, you make that mistake. And hey, in a minute, I'm going to be right back out there. 2-3 minutes, I'm going to be right back out there. I'm going to be able to make up for that. If you're getting 9 minutes a night, if you make a mistake, you might not be out there for another 5-6 minutes. And not even because you were benched, but just because that's the way the rotation goes. And you're a fourth liner, and that's your role.
Suddenly there's a penalty. Yeah. Now there's 2 minutes where you're definitely not getting out there.
Exactly. So to me, it's less about, does Lixell play a fourth line game? Like, no, he's not Garnet Hathaway. He's certainly not Nick Delorier in terms of style. But, I look at somebody like Scott Laughton. Scott Laughton, I know he's having a bad year this year, but Scott Laughton is a skilled guy. He can make plays. But Scott Laughton can also make plays and be useful in 9 minutes a night if that's how it goes. I question whether Lixell can do what makes him good at the AHL level in those kinds of limited minutes. And I also question whether he can score enough at the NHL level to warrant 15 minutes a night, even as a third liner. I want him to prove me wrong, because it's not even really proving me wrong. I'm just skeptical. It was the same skepticism I had about David Kasha. I had that same feeling of him being a tweener. I like Lixell more because I think Lixell is a more skilled player on the whole than Kasha is. But I have the same concern of, if he's not a third liner at the NHL level, can he be an NHLer? Because I don't think he fits as a fourth liner. Before
we throw it to the interview, I want to tell you about my friends over at Bagels and Company. That's right, Bagels and Co. The best Brooklyn-style bagels made right here with Philly love. First thing you got to know about Bagels and Company, huge bagels. These things are gigantic and they're delicious, and they have a huge variety of them, usually 15 to 20 different types to choose from daily. And when you have that many bagels in stock, you need a huge selection of cream cheeses, 30 different varieties of cream cheeses and schmears available daily. Obviously, as I always tell you, they have the, sports-themed ones, sports-themed flavors. They have the seasonal varieties. You saw me eat that Christmas-themed bagel at the Reading Terminal show. They have Eagles, Phillies, all sorts of different types of cream cheeses to go along with any maybe party, catering event that you have. Go to Bagels & Co. But the most important thing I would say is that they're an affordable brand. You get a lot of food for cheap, and that's huge for pretty much everyone I know, especially this time of year, coming out of the holidays. Maybe you want to do a little something special, having an office party or something. Everyone goes with the pretzels. Everyone goes with the chicken nuggets, something like that. Mix it up. Go with Bagels & Co., man. It's a little something different, and there's plenty to choose from as we've laid out. So for the best Brooklyn-style bagels made right here in Philly, head to thebagelsandco.com/store-locator to find the closest Bagels & Company near you. Charlie, do you want to talk a little more about the Phantoms, or just throw it to the interview and see where we are when we come out.
Yeah, I'll just give like a little bit of an intro to the Phantoms before we get into the interview with Bob. So the Phantoms this year, not doing great, at least in terms of record. 17, 16, 5-2. So they've lost significantly more games than they've won, because I guess if you're looking at this on the whole, that would be like a 17-23 straight up win-loss record. They're 7th in the Atlantic Division. I think there were expectations they were going to be better. We talk about this with Bob in a few minutes. Top scorers, Cooper Marody, a former Flyers draft pick who was traded before being signed. Now he's brought back. He's now clearly just an AHL vet.
Future general manager.
Yeah, you never know. Future Flyers alumni game star. Cooper Marody leads the team with 35 points in 40 games. Samu Tuomala leads all the prospects with 12 goals, 34 points in 40 games. Second in the AHL in rookie scoring. You have Lexell, 28 points in 33 games. Tanner Lazinski, who's actually banged up at the moment, so he's injured, 26 points in 33 games. And then Emil Andre, 22 points in 31 games. We will discuss Emil Andre with Bob, but that will not come until tomorrow. So tomorrow is when we talk about Emil Andre.
3 or so.
But yes, Emil Andre, 4th in the AHL among rookie defensemen in scoring. So he's having a good start to his professional career in North America, even if he wasn't able to stick with the Flyers to start the season. There's your quick little rundown of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Now we will get to part 1 of our interview with Bob Rotruck and go into the details.
Or we'll wait for that.
So we are here with the voice of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, Bob Rotruck. Bob, thanks so much for joining us today.
Charlie, thanks for having me. Good to talk to you.
Definitely. So as I've been very honest about on this show, due to the fact that I cover the Philadelphia Flyers on a daily basis, I do not have time to watch the Lehigh Valley Phantoms very often. I try to get up there a couple of times a year. Haven't had a chance to yet this year, but people will ask me how the prospects are doing, and I have to essentially depend upon the reports I hear from people in the organization and then people who actually are able to watch Phantoms games on a daily basis. And Bob obviously is as much of a Phantoms expert as you're going to get. So we wanted to have Bob on the show during this bye week to dive a little bit into the Phantoms, the team, the prospects, and just how things are going. About what, an hour, 90 minutes away by car?
Something
like that.
It depends on when you're traveling. That's right. Yeah. An hour if you're going to come up at 1 in the morning or something, probably longer than that if you're coming up in the afternoon.
Fair point. So I guess I'll kick it off with more of a bigger picture question on the team as a whole.
Yeah.
So the Phantoms right now are 7th in the division. After seemingly taking a step forward last season, obviously they made the playoffs. Elan Perrier got a lot of praise within the organization for the work he did both with the prospects and in terms of the team playing well. I know they've lost some guys. Tyson Forrester's an NHL player now. Anisimov isn't on the team anymore. Zamula is up there. Brink spent most of the second half of the year with the team. He's been with the Flyers most of the year. But I think the expectations were probably, at least from the outside, higher than how the team has performed thus far. So I'm curious as to, what's been happening there and why they maybe haven't lived up to preseason expectations.
I think it's fair to say that the expectations were higher inside as well. And I also think it's fair to wonder what is happening. The team is better than their record. And a lot of people say that, for their own teams and their own situations. I think it's very clear for Lehigh Valley. And you have a few different aspects here that you can look at for why the record is where it is. The defense is young, and that's been exposed sometimes. I think the goaltending has not performed up to expectations consistently enough. Sometimes Felix Sandstrom and Cal Peterson have been great. Other times they've let in a goal or two that maybe they probably should not have. And it's hard to win when your team save percentage is hovering around 885. We don't want to pin everything on the goaltending, but that does make a difference. And there have been times when the Phantoms have played some games where I feel like they've outperformed the opponent and you outshoot them 40-25, but they get a goaltender that stands on his head and you're just not buying a goal. And so some of it is a little bit of iffy luck going against them. it is frustrating because the team has been more or less relatively healthy. They have not been rated that much by the Flyers because when the Flyers get injuries, obviously that affects the Phantoms, and
Sure.
Lehigh Valley is going to lose one of their top guys or more than one of the top guys. That happens to a lot of teams. It's happened a little bit more recently with a couple of recent injuries. Wade Allison's been out, Tanner Lazinski has been out, and Louis Belpedio, he might be out for a little longer also, and he's a big deal on defense. And now Garrett Wilson, the captain, is out at least for the short term. So now it's starting to pile up a little bit on Lehigh Valley, whereas before they kind of had too many players. But yeah, I think the feeling is, look, we're playing well, and then we make one really bad mistake in there, shoot ourselves in the foot. It costs us a game in close games, or you're going to play a lot of one-goal games. Those types of mistakes are critical. And after the Saturday game, the Phantoms were down in that game 3-1, rallied to tie it in the third on goals for Brink, and Allison in his first game back had a chance to win. They lost in a shootout, so that was, that's kind of a coin flip when you get to a shootout. And Wade Allison in the postgame actually, I think, put it best, and he said, look, if we just stop shooting ourselves in the foot, we've got a really good team here. And I think everyone believes that. And what I can tell, and what Lappy has also said many times, is, look, we're still, and the players too, we're still tight in the room, and they feel like they still have that chemistry. And I think they know what they have, even if the results have been a little bit shorter of what they've been hoping that they would be by this point right now.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess the hope would be, assuming that some of these injuries don't linger that they're dealing with now, that they'll have a much stronger second half than first half.
I think that they're banking on it. Yes, I think so. I certainly believe that too. Definitely need some better goaltending in key moments though as well. That's just definitely a thing.
Gotcha. I guess now we'll move into the individual prospects. I know this is where, a lot of Flyers fans are more focused on. They'd like to see the Phantoms win, but they care much more about the names they know and how they're performing. So I guess aside from Bobby Brink, who obviously just was sent down, he spent most of the year with the Flyers, Samu Tuomala is probably the top prospect on this roster. What I really liked about him, watching him at development camp in Voorhees this summer, and then at main camp, also in Voorhees moving into the fall, it was the way he was playing with a style of play that to me seemed very translatable to the North American pro game. It was a fast-paced style. He was getting in on the forecheck. He was actually being pretty chippy for his size. It just looked like the kind of style where you watched him and you said, yeah, that's a really good NHL middle sixer. Obviously, his production's been strong this year with the Phantoms, but has that style continued throughout the season for Samu?
Yes, and you talk about his size, and he doesn't come off as the biggest guy there. I can stand right next to him. I'm 5'6.5". I'm not a big guy, and he's not exactly towering over me. But then you look at him; he's winning board battles. He goes in there and gets his nose dirty some. I don't want him at the net front too much to get killed in there, but sometimes he can do that too. But he wins board battles. And, I've talked with Lappy about it, and also our assistant coach, John Snowden, because he's had a couple of assists where he's digging it away and setting up Lixell or whoever for a really nice goal. And I'm like, well, look at the assist that Samu had. That's not like a pretty 2-on-1 sauce across or anything like that. That's digging it away against some strong guys. And John Snowden, our assistant coach, had pointed out to me, don't underestimate how strong Samu is. His legs, are like Kapanen back in the day as well. There's that similarity there.
Right.
Samu is not as wide, but his legs, man, he's built like a tank from the waist below, even if he looks like he's a little scrawny up top. He just turned 21 years old, so he's still a kid. Now, I will say, though, and Samu knows this, and Lappy has referenced it as well. Okay, the point production is there. Sometimes there's some really good plays. It's consistency, though. And he even had a talk with a couple of guys, including Ollie Lixell the previous weekend. We were in Cleveland 2 weekends ago and had a loss on Friday. And he said, I talked with some guys about, not taking shifts off and really pushing. and when you're away from the puck and playing harder. And that's something that they've talked about with Ollie before. Coaching's a lot of repeating your own words over and over. But I got the impression that was about Lexell and also about Samu Tuomala. And sometimes he gets a goal and it's great. But he knows, and he's said it before, like, hey, the last few games, I really don't think I've been playing all that well, which is probably a good thing. Maybe he's a little bit of a perfectionist, as a lot of players are. But I know that all the Philly fans get so excited when he scores a goal and bring him up. I see that stuff on Twitter and so forth too. He's not there yet. He's going to get there, but he has still work to be done in a lot of that off the puck stuff. Now it's with a different line as well, because Tanner Lazinski is out, and Ollie Lexell is up. That was the combo for a little while. Now he's with Rhett Gardner, who is a really nice stabilizing force there. Then you put Brink and Tuomala on that line together, and they're just zipping around. I don't buy it that Brink is that slow. He looked pretty darn fast to me, or fast enough anyway, to really kind of dominate the games last weekend. So watching that line try to develop some chemistry for however long Bobby Brink is going to be here with us is really exciting too. By the way, when I was talking about what Lappy had told me after the Friday game, Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago, first shift of the game, Ollie Lexell is flying in there and blasts some guy in the forecheck. And I go, okay, now and he doesn't do a lot of that. That's what Lappy's talking about. And then literally 2-3 days later, Ollie's going up. I mean, they notice these things, and it is important. And that you hear that talk all the time. Hey, it's why Bobby Brink came back down to us in the first place as well. Torts was saying, okay, yeah, sometimes he can produce. What else are you doing? Everything else needs work. And there was also, and I'm getting off on a tangent here, but there was a goal in our game this past Saturday. And I think it was Andre Tuomala actually cut across on the power play, I think. Maybe not. It wasn't power play. It was high slot. And he takes a shot, rebound off a goalie, and Brink is there to put it in, getting his nose dirty, getting a greasy goal. Okay, we know he can score some of those skill goals, but getting in there and doing that, is that not what Torts was exactly talking about with Bobby Brink? I don't know how much he's getting it into the net front in Philadelphia. I don't get to watch the Flyers games as much, just like you don't get to watch the Phantoms games. But looking at that goal that Brink had, I'm like, well, maybe that's even more important than some of the really pretty goals and the powerful snipes that we see when he gets in there and gets a dirty, greasy goal like that one. That might actually be more important and more attention grabbing to Danny Briere, who was there at the game on Saturday, came up from Philadelphia to see that one, as did a lot of Flyers officials. I feel like that's really important for Bobby Brink as well.
Gotcha. So going back, and I'll get to Brink in a second, but
Samu.
Going back to Tuomala, do you get the sense, because he's obviously had a very weird trajectory since being drafted. He bounced around. He spent a little bit of time in the minors after being drafted, then went back overseas, couldn't really find his spot. Do you get the sense that because of his odd path to get to this point, that even though he's playing well, that maybe they want him to have a full stabilizing season and not rush him up to the NHL as quickly as possible?
Well, I think so, but I wouldn't be surprised if, they dangled a carrot for him and gave him that reward at the end of the year too.
Got it.
Because he deserves it. The fact of the matter is, he's a big surprise to everyone. And Lappy has said that many times, and I said it right from the very beginning. We had him here 2 years ago for a little over a month, and he's flying around in the preseason games. That's not really the same, a Phantoms preseason game with a lot of ECHL guys. He played 2 games for the Phantoms, and he was completely lost out there. All over the place, had no idea where to go. Stayed with us a couple more weeks, practices, trying to get it. The guy could barely speak English then. It wasn't happening. He wasn't ready to get into the lineup. He just wasn't close. And then after, and I'm reading, it goes down to Mestis League in Finland and all of that. Right. And and his numbers were not exactly through the roof in Finland. So when Tuomala's coming back this year at 20 years old, okay, he's fast. He's got a great shot. He has some skill set there. But what I saw from him 2 years ago, I didn't think he was going to be ready for this. I thought it was going to be some real growing pains. And there are some. But he has been, because of his English, which he has worked on so well, now he can do a full interview. And I know you saw him in Voorhees, back at rookie camp and all of that. I can talk with him for 5-10 minutes and he's fine. He can do it, which is amazing compared to where he was 2 years ago, where he could say hi, and that was about it. And obviously that's huge for him to be able to understand what the coaches are talking about as well, and to get on that page and understand everything that's happening with conversations with his teammates too. He is so much better for this first half of the season, with still some kinks to work out, but he is so much better than I think any of us expected him to be. I would assume that probably Danny Briere was there as well. Like, we didn't know what we were going to have out of him, and there's going to be some real growing pains. And it's like, wow, Samu's doing okay. And now here he is, the second highest scoring rookie in the entire AHL. Like, he's been that good when he's on top of his game. But referring to him as having, being surprisingly good this year, I think that's fair. 20 years old, didn't have great numbers in Finland, was bouncing around, couldn't find his stride. Now coming back to the North American game, where he wasn't exactly doing great when we had him 2 years ago, he looks so good. But yes, to your original point, I for a variety of reasons, also because he's not there yet, right, I don't think they're going to rush him and find a spot for him in the NHL. He needs to continue here, and he still has work on his game to improve. If he goes up there, it's going to be, sort of similar in some ways to Bobby Brink in John Tortorella's eyes all over again. Like, okay, yeah, you're doing some things right. Everything else, you need to work on this and send him back. There's no point in bringing him up, except for maybe a taste as kind of a reward, which I do think could happen. I'm just projecting there.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense, and that's kind of where my head was at with him as well. Maybe he gets a cup of coffee at the end as just a pat on the back, preparing. Give the guy a chance to see what it's like, so he knows what to work on over the summer, and then try to make the big push at next camp to maybe try to make the team out of training camp.
There were some really simple things as well at the beginning of the season that he has refined. They put him in the slot, in the bumper position on the power play. And he's kind of rotated over, sometimes over on his one-timer side on the left circle. But he would take it and he would just hammer away as hard as he could on any one-timer. Had to have a really quick release. I think he's panicking because it's North American game. You have no time. And he's missing the goal by 2 yards, and it's just coming around the boards and coming out. And he's not even close. And that there was no point to that. And I'm like, I think that he might as well be closing his eyes and shooting it. And Lappy has talked with him, and I think others have as well. Just settle down. You don't have to shoot it as hard as you humanly can. You can shoot it at 90%, and you still have a crazy wicked shot. But if you get it to a corner and actually get it on net, you're giving yourself a chance. And that's when he started to get some goals and getting them to go in. I talked with him about that with Lappy as well. I think everyone's on the same page. He was overshooting before and just missing the net by so much. It was just ridiculous. So that's where and so sometimes it would accidentally be on target and go in. That's kind of where he was in early November. Like, let's kind of settle down here. And it's really simple, basic things. And remember, he just turned 21. He's still a kid,
right?
And there's so much time for him. And I see him making strides, and then maybe, some steps back one week after another. He's going to get there, but he's not there yet. But the point production is indeed, the Flyers fans are correct to be excited about him, I think.
Gotcha. So moving on to Bobby Brink, who you talked about briefly, in the conversation about Tuomala.
Yeah.
Obviously since he's been sent down, he's been scoring. He's got the 3 goals in 2 games. But do you get the sense, because I expect a guy who can hold his own at the NHL level is probably going to put up points at the AHL level. Do you get the sense that he's approaching this demotion with the right attitude? Because I know for the Flyers, that's just as important as whether he's putting up points, is if he's responding well and he's not sulking, that he's trying to work on the things they want him to work on down there.
Well, for the most part, those guys try to hold that stuff from me.
Fair.
And sometimes you can tell the guy is pouting. I mean, Morgan Frost back in the day had a real heart-to-heart with me. He was frustrated. Why am I getting sent down? And, some guys will talk and some guys won't. But I do think so. I think he has the right approach. I think he wants to play, and obviously he hadn't for the last 3 games with Philadelphia. But your previous point that, hey, when guys go down, yeah, of course they're going to score. I don't know if that's correct, though. You know, I didn't know what to expect out of Bobby. He looks a lot better than he did when we had him last year. When he had some ups and downs, he was coming off the hip surgery.
Right.
A back-to-back for Bobby. That second game, he was slow. You know, and I think he was pushing through it some. You know, he looks a ton better now than he did with us last year, which I was hoping for. But there's a lot of guys that talk about how different the AHL is because it's a more chaotic game. There's less flow. Passes maybe aren't quite as on the tape as much and some guys, Tyson Forster, I think, will talk about this, maybe Cam York too. They'll talk about how it's actually an easier game in some ways at the NHL level, which, obviously that feels contradictory to what you would expect. But I've heard so many guys say that. It doesn't make sense at first, but you have to stop and think about it from their perspective. And you're playing with better players that are putting it right on your tape on really smooth ice to set you up for, Forster on the rush to score the 2 goals that he did against Boston and so forth. So I didn't know if Bobby was going to really pop off the page when he came back. And then it was like, oh, wow. Oh, my God. And the first game, he only had 1 goal. It could have been 4. It's just developing chances all over the place, which is great. I don't know if that's enough to get him back to the NHL level, but everything else that he's doing as well. And he's just so creative with the puck. Lappy and Wade Allison also in his postgame, they talked about, Bobby's not going to be here for long. He has no business being here if he's playing like that. So he's sort of in that a little bit of in-between mode. Like he's not quite cutting it in some ways at the NHL level. Now he comes here and he gets this big confidence boost. Hey, we had sort of a similar thing in some ways, I feel like 4 or 5 years ago when Travis Sanheim came down to us, like in February, and he still actually had to continue to grow and develop since then. But this sort of reminds me of that, a guy that was expected to be at the NHL. Well, I don't know if we knew that Brink was going to make the Flyers.
Yeah, he had an amazing camp. I don't think that was the expectation.
But once he made it and he was doing so well, and then halfway through the season, nobody says, okay, is he really going to have to go back down because he stagnated some, he stalled out some. Travis Sanheim was sort of the same. Like he's a guy who's supposed to hang here. Yeah. And then they sent him back. Hexy back in the day sent him back. And then Sanheim, similarly, I think he put together like a 9-game point streak or something. He kind of thrived in his 3 weeks with us. I don't know if Brink is going to be here with us for 3 weeks, but NHL's on the All-Star break. We still have games coming up. So that whole combination, it does kind of make sense to keep Bobby here for however long. If he keeps this up, though, we're looking at him going, he doesn't belong here. Oh, wow. It really was impressive what he did, especially Friday. But then 2 goals Saturday kind of spoke for itself, too.
Yeah, another guy you mentioned, when we're talking about Bobby, and I actually wanted to bring him up as well, Wade Allison, just because he was a guy where, obviously he gets demoted at the start of the year. He gets waived, clears waivers, gets sent down. And Ian LePerriere, who can do this sometimes, can give away a little bit more information than you expect, more or less strongly implied that Wade was sulking a little bit at the beginning of the year, that he was struggling with the fact that he was demoted. Then I think it was like a few days or maybe a week later, he kind of backtracked. He said, I maybe went a little bit too far with those comments, further than I wanted to. But do you feel like now that Wade has kind of accepted and embraced where he's at now? Obviously, he wants to be up in the NHL, but is that attitude still a problem?
No, I don't think so. And I don't know if it was that much of a problem necessarily at the beginning, but yes, I think he was a little frustrated, but in a way, I mean, you don't want to be happy to be here either. A guy that is expected to be at the NHL level, but he didn't play as well at the start, and we're kind of wondering, well, what's happening with Wade. Now, more recently, he missed the last 5 games with an injury before he came back Saturday. He took some weird hit in a game on January 12th, and he left kind of hobbling and looked like it was a knee thing, maybe, because he was kind of pointing to that. It wasn't too serious, obviously. He came back a couple of weeks later, but no, he fights and competes for his guys here. Upstairs in the press box, when he's a scratch, and I noticed this 2 years ago, the scratched and injured guys, they sit one booth over from me. I'm not over there staring at them all the time, but they're usually just chilling and watching the game. Wade, 2 years ago, and I even told him this, I saw him, he gets up. You know, if the Phantoms score a goal with 2 minutes left to tie it, he's standing and and he's an emotional guy, and he's pumped. I've never seen players up there act like that. And he was actually doing it the other night, his last game out with an injury, Friday. The Phantoms were down 3-0, and they came back to tie it, and he was into it. So if that doesn't tell you something about his buy-in and compete level for this team here, this group of guys, which Bobby Brink referenced as well, it's a good group of guys here. He knows a lot of the guys, our captain Garrett Wilson and Belpedio and players like that. You know, then I don't know what will, because when you get down here, yeah, sure, it's a little bit of a disappointment when it happens. But when you get out there in the game, you want to play well and you want to win. And I mean, it's just the competitive juices get flowing. It's hard to just sort of coast through an entire hockey game like that. So I think, Wade's okay. And I think now, I don't know what the plans are for him with the Flyers in the future, but if he's going to be looked at by other teams as well, and I think that he probably has an awareness of this. He's not just playing for Danny Briere and the Flyers, but for his future also, more or less playing for 31 other teams to show them that he can still do it. Obviously, nobody claimed him off of waivers, so that's quite a statement there. I thought he would get claimed.
Yeah, I thought so too.
You know, I mean, it's early in the year, so you don't have a whole lot of injuries, you know, and different teams don't have spots to fill, and you have your own guys. But I thought somewhere there's got to be a team that wants to take a shot on him because of what he is capable of doing and what we all know he can do. But so I think Wade's okay. I thought he played very well, especially since he hadn't played in 3 weeks or whatever it was. You know, and he scored a goal that tied it in the third against the Toronto Marlies, and he was absolutely pumped up when Brink and they got a 5. They were down by 2. They had a 5-on-3 early in the third, and then Brink and Allison scored back-to-back, 5-on-3 and then 5-on-4, pretty much from the same spot over in the left circle. Allison's was a little bit on the rush, and it was a gorgeous shot, and it was his first goal in a month. He hadn't scored for a couple weeks before his injury, so he knows that. But boy, when he gets that one goal, you know, now they can start to snowball for him, and it wouldn't surprise me if Wade keeps it up and ends up having a big week out of this. That would be really good, and I'm kind of waiting for him to really get rolling. He's come that close a couple of times, and then kind of, then they weren't coming for him as much. Part of that's where the team had a little bit of a lag as well.
Welcome back. That was part 1 of Charlie's interview with Phantoms play-by-play announcer Bob Rotruck. Touched on a lot of things there. Obviously, Bob, big into the Phantoms. That's why we had to split this up into 2 parts. There's a whole other piece coming to you tomorrow that we will get to. But for today, a couple of things he talked about. Let's start with the guy we mentioned earlier, Bobby Brink. I mean, the big takeaway here, he said like 3 different times, Bobby's not going to be here for long. I don't know if he's going to be here another 3 weeks. Just, talking about the combinations, like, well, he's building chemistry, but like, but is that even going to matter in terms of the Phantoms season itself? He's got the 3 goals in 2 games, 9 shots on goal for the Phantoms in the 2 games that he has played down there. What are you thinking after he basically told us, like, because we made the comparison earlier. Listen, he was putting up points last year with the Phantoms, but everyone said, like, he's either hurt, he's still hurt coming off the injury. He doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Sounds like he looks real good.
My initial takeaway is Ole Luxell better start scoring. Because if he doesn't, Bobby Brink's coming back up for your job, buddy. No, it does sound like, and I know Bob couldn't speak to the specifics as to whether Bobby Brink was sulking or not, but presumably if you're dominating that much, you ain't sulking. You're focused on, maybe you're angry, and if you're angry, good. But maybe you're like, you know what? I shouldn't be down here. I'm going to show them how wrong they were for sending me down, and I'm just going to tear it up in the AHL. And it seems like that's exactly what he's doing, which, hey, I don't think the Flyers have a problem with that mentality. What they don't want is they don't want a woe is me, the world is structured against me. It's all so unfair. If you go down there with a, fuck these guys, I'm going to prove how wrong they are. I think the Flyers love that shit.
I mean, we know based on all evidence that is the attitude John Tortorella wants every single one of his players to have.
Yeah.
No matter what they have accomplished or what they haven't accomplished, he wants them to feel as if they are like accepting a challenge every day. And if you do that, you're probably going to make Morgan Frost finally went and basically got in an argument with John Tortorella. And we just said, it seems as if for now, the scratch Morgan Frost option is off the table.
Yeah.
Because now, he's backed it up with his play.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it. You have to actually
John
be good.
And John Tortorella would argue that there's a connection there.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Like, you have to back it up with your play. But if your attitude becomes, I'm going to prove you the fuck wrong, and then you go out and actually do that on the ice, like, you are now indispensable to John Tortorella because you are a success story. He gets to point to you in film room and be like, remember when he was getting sat? Now he isn't. Why do you think that is?
Yeah.
Like, so I really hope it, because, man, if Bobby Brink becomes a top 6 or top 9 forward for this team, one, it just makes that whole draft better because Cam York seems to be coming into his own, and but it's one less thing.
Yeah, it's
just one less thing.
No, it is, and it's also just the fact that this team, it's really funny given the way the previous decade went. This team really needs playmakers.
Yeah.
It needs passers.
It's very
now,
funny.
maybe Morgan Frost is taking a step forward where he can be part of this and he can be one of those playmakers. But I think Bobby Brink has better. Morgan Frost is quicker. And Morgan Frost, I think, has a more complete game at this stage of his career. I think Bobby Brink is a better pure passer than Morgan Frost in terms of in the offensive zone, finding guys. I have accepted in my mind, I do not think Morgan Frost will ever at the NHL level be able to be the guy who distributes on the power play, who's the prime distributor, even on a power play too. I feel like if he was going to show it, he would have shown it. They have enough shooters. He's not that guy. He can't do it. Bobby Brink, I think, could theoretically be a guy who is a primary distributor on a power play if he hits his ceiling. I think he just has, we've talked about it on the show before. He seems like he has great vision even when he's under puck pressure. He makes these decisions. We've seen a couple amazing passes he's had around the net where there are guys basically on top of him, and he's still found Joel Farabee for a tap-in goal. I really like Brink's upside as a passer. And if he hits, if he's a 60-point-a-year guy who you can stick on your second line, suddenly, you still need, I think, one more elite playmaking type, ideally. But maybe you don't need as many. Maybe then you've got Frost and Brink, and those are your two secondary playmakers, and then you just need to get that one guy who can be a 60 assist a year guy, and then boom, you're set from a stylistic standpoint up front.
It's hard not to laugh at. The Flyers need play. Like, they have all these dudes who can shoot now, and they need someone who can pass. We have seen, I think, an uptick in Morgan Frost's, toughness on and off the puck, because that was what was separating he and Brink to me early in the season, was Frost still looked like that guy who was allergic to contact. Wow, it was like Brink just won a battle and then made a pass out of that. Or, Brink's going to the front of the net doing those little things. And Bob said, he scored a goal going to the net. That's probably one of those things that, John Tortorella harps on because it's something he mentions all the time. But I'm really looking forward to seeing Brink come back up. Do you, from his answer, and he doesn't know what the front office is thinking. From his answer, do you think it's more likely than not we see Brink again this season?
I am expecting to see Brink again this season. Now, when that happens, I don't know. To me, the path of least resistance in terms of a call-up is when you make a couple trades at the deadline, you bring Brink back up for the final month and a half of the season. That would be the easiest way, because I do think there will be spots opened up once a couple guys get moved. However, maybe Brink just makes the decision for them. Maybe he plays so well that, Danny Briere and a bunch of Flyers brass were at that game on Saturday. Maybe if Brink does this for another week and a half, they're like, all right, well, he's got 10 goals in 6 games. we've now lost 8 straight games. We're playing like crap. Let's bring up the guy who's apparently on a scoring binge.
Another player that is maybe in line for a call-up. I think it would be maybe a little surprising, but Samu's been killing it down there from all reports, and we just heard it straight from Bob Rotruck that it's going real well for him. He's found his game. Now, there's still areas of the game that he needs to improve on, but the scoring part, he's doing pretty damn well.
Oh, it's there. And I thought Bob more or less echoed my assumption and what I more or less have been able to gather in terms of the way Tuomala is going to be developed, I guess, promoted, that sort of way. Bob basically said, look, I'm not expecting them to rush Tuomala up. He's still working on things. However, it would not at all shock me if they give him a pat on the back reward call up at the end of the season, give him a few games, let him see what it's like to be in the NHL, give him the ability to, okay, this is what overwhelmed me a bit in this 3-game stint. Now I'm going to spend the summer working on those things so I give myself the opportunity to take a real run at a roster spot come September. I could see that. I am not expecting Samu Tuomala to be the reinforcements that they call up because we're in a playoff push and he's going to be that guy who gives us that boost. I don't think that's the way they're viewing him. I think they still view him as a guy who needs some work, who isn't a finished product, and is finally having a year of stability. I don't think they necessarily want to mess with that. However, I'm really excited about how Tuomala fits. Primarily, I was always intrigued by him, and he showed me a lot at development camp this summer and at rookie camp and main camp.
He got a long look.
He did. However, even then, I wasn't as excited as I am now, not even because of the production he's put up in the AHL, but because of the changes the Flyers have made to the way they play. I do not know if I would be as excited about Tuomala, even if he was doing everything he's doing in the AHL this year, if the Flyers were still playing the style they played last year. This, grind it out, forecheck you to death, defense style. Now they are playing a rush-oriented, transition chance attacking style. Samu Tuomala is really, really fast. I don't know if he is as good of an all-around skater as Owen Tippett, but his top end speed ain't that far off.
Tippett has the power strides. I don't know if Tuomala has that. We just have to watch him more and see how he develops. He just turned 21.
Exactly.
He's not a man yet.
Exactly.
But it is exciting.
Tuomala is fast. He's a quick guy, and having that speed on the wing with the way they're playing, where they're allowing the wingers to blast the zone a little bit early, make themselves an option for stretch passes, get 2-on-1s, get 3-on-2s, get breakaways. Tuomala could potentially be a great fit for the penalty kill. The guy who I go back to when I watched Tuomala, when I watched him at development camp, when I watched him play his best on the times I've been able to watch him when he was overseas, I'm like, man, if it comes together, I don't think he can be a top-line forward or anything like that, but I see some Carl Hagelin in his game, and that's a guy who was a really, really good middle-of-the-lineup player for some darn good teams.
Just a matchup problem.
Yes.
Okay, he might not have, the 5 tools, but the 2 or 3 tools he has are elite.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to defend for third lines.
Exactly. As a depth guy on some darn good Rangers teams and some cup-winning Penguins teams, he was, I wouldn't say integral, but he was a key part of those teams.
The HBK line won them a cup.
Exactly. I watch Tuomala and I see Hagelin, and that excites me because I always had time for Carl Hagelin on my NHL team. He never was on my NHL team, but I would have had time for him. If they can get Tuomala to be that type of guy where, no, he's never going to rack up the points because he's not a high-end finisher at the NHL level, but he's racking up a lot of chances. He's constantly putting pressure on defense. He's using that speed all the time. It's exciting to me.
Just because this came up in your interview and because this actually showed up in our mailbag questions, and I didn't notice it till now because it was in the show more replies.
Okay.
And it wasn't just a porn bot, it was an actual question.
Oh, it was an actual person.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we don't have a graphic for it, but since it came up, this is from @Illy in the Philly.
Sure.
Who is the projected backup goalie in the next year or two? Those in Lehigh Valley have been struggling. And Bob alluded to, you were asking about the season that they're having. And it's I just looked at elite prospects, and Yeah, the goalie numbers are horrendous in
not
Lehigh
good.
Valley.
Not great, Bob.
No, they've been really like Felix Sandstrom and Cal Peterson are both around like 890 or so. That's not going to get it done. You would think there's not a ton of confidence in either to give them any sort of success in the NHL. Sam Ersson is the default number one now due to the Carter Hart situation. We don't know how that's going to resolve itself, but one would assume going forward it's Ersson and question mark.
I think it's reasonable to until we know further information about Hart and what's going to happen to not pencil him into a role.
You would think that's probably not going to be the case.
He's going to be in limbo for, I suspect, quite a while.
For quite some time. So it's Ersson and question mark. Do you think this is going to be Kolosov solves that, or they go out and find themselves a veteran?
I don't know. But if I had to guess, I would say that I think they would want Kolosov to get some AHL time.
You would think, right?
That seems to be their MO. They want these guys to, they're transitioning to a new style of play. The KHL is obviously a really good league. It's a totally different style of play, totally different ice surface in some parts, with regards to, the way goalies have to play angles. I think they're going to want to give him some time unless he just goes out in camp and crushes it. So to me, my guess, if Carter Hart is not going to be a factor for the Flyers next season or possibly beyond, my guess is they will go out and they will sign someone. I don't think they'll spend a ton of money, but they're going to go out and sign someone to make it so they don't have to rely upon Sam Ersson to start 60 games. I think that to me fits best with what the Flyers have done in terms of team building over these last couple of years.
All right, we're going to leave this up to Charlie to close things out. Do you want to go Lappy or do you want to go the mailbag questions?
Let's do some mailbag questions.
Let's get to some Mailbag Monday questions. It means it's just another Mailbag Monday. Of course, we're going to be answering them all week because that's how it works. But let's get to the first question from, let's go to Gus the Groundhog. And he asks, any chance they take a run at Jiricek? Always thought they should have picked him in 22 to begin with. I think that was your guy in 2022. It was most people's consensus best.
I wouldn't say he was my guy because I won't say I ever fell in love with Jiricek when I watched him. So David Jiricek, for those who don't know, he was the 6th overall pick in the 2022 draft. Right-handed shooting defenseman, was ultimately taken by Columbus. The reason why he is in the news is because the Columbus Blue Jackets have been, let's just say, not doing the best job of developing him. They're a mess. Jiricek was sent down to the AHL, and not only was he sent down to the AHL after being scratched for the better part of a month, he opened up to Aaron Portzline of The Athletic and gave some pretty, I won't use the word damning, but I would say surprisingly open quotes about how much he disagrees with his treatment by the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have essentially told him, you're not one of our 6 best defensemen, so you're not going to play. And his point is, you guys stink. Why are you not letting me develop up in the NHL? I would have to say, got to give the point here to Jiricek. I think he might be right here.
He's got a point.
Kind of has a point.
He's got a point. Now, I saw some comments earlier in the show because that has been like a developing story with Jiricek. Everyone's talking about where he might end up because it doesn't seem like he's long for Columbus.
To be clear, I don't think this ends with Jiricek getting traded.
Oh, no.
I think this ends with everyone getting fired in Columbus.
That's a fair point.
But if for some reason they keep them all, yes, maybe the people who somehow still have their jobs would trade Jiricek.
Yeah, you can't let Kekalainen trade him, right? But who's his oversight?
I guess the owner.
Who's stopping him? So it's if available. Would you see the Flyers take a run at him?
So this is something that came up a couple of times in my mailbag. This morning, the diehard section of the mailbag was released. If you were a diehard, you can read that. 20 questions were answered.
If you're not, sign up.
Every single diehard person in our Discord who asked a question got it answered in our special mailbag questions section of the Discord. So that's just another perk for you if you want to become a PHLY diehard. We also had the free-for-all mailbag. I believe that came out on Friday or Saturday. I don't know. Days aren't real. But
who's to say?
A couple people did
Rotruck's scheduled for Monday. He's scheduled for Tuesday.
Yeah,
who's to say?
Anyway, A couple people brought up the idea of, I think one person brought up the idea of, would the Flyers potentially trade for Philip Broberg, as he's a defenseman on Edmonton. I say these names assuming everyone knows. I have to remember that not everyone knows these random people who very well could just be making them out of thin air. Broberg's a guy who's kind of failed to make his mark in Edmonton. He's a defenseman. Some people brought up the idea of, well, instead of trading for a pick, what if they traded for Broberg? My argument is the Flyers have a lot of these spots on defense already filled up. They have a lot of prospects they have to develop. And that's not even accounting for the fact that apparently they want to re-sign Nick Seeler. So I am skeptical of, like, you can't get every reclamation project. You only have so many spots with which to develop reclamation projects. Jamie Drysdale has one of those spots. Igor Zamula is a guy who they are trying to develop. Cam York is a guy who they're trying to develop. They have Oliver Bonk coming in the next couple of years. Emil Andre is pushing for a spot. Ronnie Adder somehow has to fit in. I just don't know if I am super into the idea of trading for another reclamation project type in Broberg or Jiricek when I don't know if you have the room to actually develop them properly.
And that's like, when we talked to Jonesy, you asked about, well, maybe now that you have Drysdale, the focus is shifting away from defensemen.
And he basically said, yeah.
And he said, yes. Like, you continue to look.
Of course.
And that's maybe you, like, those later round guys, those second to third, fourth round guys that maybe you draft, like, they're a while away. You know, there's a lot of questions answered before it's even like, well, where does this guy fit? Well, he's 2 years away from turning pro.
Exactly.
So
you can kick that can down the road.
And then he's going to go to the Phantoms for 2 years. So who the hell knows? You know, there's a lot that has to go on. A guy like Jiricek, he's pissed off he's not playing right now. If you also put him in the AHL, he will continue to be pissed off.
Yeah. Jiricek's skill set's intriguing to me. It absolutely is. There's a reason why at the time I preferred them take Jiricek over Cutter Gauthier. Obviously, Gauthier developed better than I anticipated. I think a lot of people did. Now Gauthier is no longer a Flyer, but I don't love Jiricek. I like him. I think he's a good prospect. I think he absolutely does have number one defenseman upside. The thing is that, like, I think Jamie Drysdale does too. And someone, this wasn't even a mailbag question, this was someone tweeted at me on Twitter just randomly, like, would you do Drysdale for Jiricek? And my answer was no, because the one thing about Jiricek that has always been a problem and then will remain a problem, probably for his entire career, he's not a great skater. And I just personally worry, I think he can still be a very good NHL defenseman. I worry that someone who is, like, probably on the whole a below average NHL skater, I don't know if you can be a number one defenseman if you were a below average NHL skater. Whereas I watch Jamie Drysdale is a well above average NHL skater. I would, if you give me the choice between two guys with high end upside on defense, one guy's a great skater, one guy's not, I'm taking the great skater every day. That's my personal bias. Some people would look at it as Drysdale's small and I'm taking the big guy. That's never going to be me. I'm always going to prioritize skating over size. That's my personal bias. But my thing is that I certainly wouldn't trade Drysdale for Jiricek because I value Drysdale more. Also, if you're developing Drysdale with big minutes, I don't know if there will be enough minutes to go around to also give those to Jiricek as well, given the fact they're both right-handed shots. You have Ristolainen, you have Bonk coming, you have Sanheim, who's better on the right side. I don't know. I don't hate the idea, but I just think it would honestly end up being more trouble than it's worth.
All right, last question for today from Stackatoshi, a regular here in the show's mailbag. Was there any legitimacy to the Zegras rumor, or was that people just saying they knew Drysdale was friends with him and the Flyers could use a young center?
I think the answer to this is yes.
Yeah. It's both.
It's both.
It was clear from, I mean, I was following the Drysdale and Zegras negotiations in the summer that bled over. That's why they both missed camp. They didn't have contracts yet. It's not a holdout when you don't have a contract. You're not signed. But it was a little bit of a contentious situation, the contract negotiations there with Pat Verbeek. And it later came out, basically right after the Drysdale trade, like, phone still works. Give us a call. Yeah. So it, like, putting pieces together, it's like, okay, we we're in a bit of a, I know you feel differently. Maybe if they were that interested in Zegras, they could have just thrown it all together. My thing is they were in a time crunch.
True.
Maybe the situation was like, hey, we'll come back to it, and then of course he goes and gets hurt. So it's like, oh, well, now there's really no rush on this part. The next day he gets hurt basically. So I'm like, is there legitimate interest? Like, no, Danny Briere did not tell me. Like Keith Jones, when we sat down with him, didn't tell me, hey, off the record, it's Zegras. He didn't say
Zegras is the guy.
He didn't say one way or the other. And if he did and it was off the record, I'm smart enough to know I can't say. I'm just telling you, he wasn't like, yeah, we're in on Zegras. Like none of that was said. But I would not be shocked if there was some sort of talk, but for the most part, this is people going, hey, we need a center, and he's friends with this guy, right?
Exactly. That's what it boils down to. The Twitter conversation is mostly because Drysdale and Zegras are buddies. It's like, oh, well, like they broke up the best friends. Well, about that, what if we brought the best friends back together in a new locale? My thing with this is that it's just very tough for me to imagine that the Flyers haven't at least thought about the idea of Zegras. Like we talked to Jonesy last week, and Jonesy, unprompted, said, our top priority pretty much now is center. Well, guess what? There ain't that many under 23 years old centers theoretically available with top-line center potential. Yeah. It's basically one guy, Trevor Zegras. So, of course, the Flyers have at least checked in as to, hey, not saying we're going to trade for him, but if, in the offseason we're thinking about it, what might he cost? It would blow me away if they haven't at least discussed the possibility. It just makes too much sense.
My addition to this question that I wanted to ask you, because the question about trades like this is, all right, what's the price? What would you be willing to give up? Would you trade Frost plus picks, ancillary pieces for Trevor Zegras?
Yes, 100%. I think some people were shocked about this. It's very funny when, 4 weeks ago, if you would have proposed the idea of trading Morgan Frost as a centerpiece for Trevor Zegras,
hilarious.
People would have been like, yeah, that sounds great. Now it's like, no, I think that's too much. We can't afford to trade Morgan Frost.
And when I say Frost plus, some ancillary pieces, okay, whatever.
One
of the first-round picks, to be certain.
I would,
and then maybe some more shit,
I
too.
would, in an absolute heartbeat, trade away a first-round pick and Morgan Frost for Trevor Zegras. The fact that I would be willing to do that so quickly tells you that there's no friggin' way Anaheim would do it. You would have to give up more. But as the starting point, I would offer a first and Morgan Frost and a goddamn heartbeat for Trevor Zegras. And I think Morgan Frost is a perfectly fine player. I think if Morgan Frost had the upside to be an impact first-line center at the NHL level, we would have seen it by now. We have not. Maybe Morgan Frost will ultimately top out as a really perfectly solid second-line center, and that's great. He's not first-line center caliber, in my opinion. If he was, we'd have seen it. We haven't seen it. Trevor Zegras has that upside. Will he get to that point in his career? I don't know.
Yeah, he's not yet either.
But he has that upside. He is everything that Morgan Frost is, but a lot better.
Yeah. All right, so that's the mailbag for today. Before we get out of here, I need you to ask yourself a question. What would you do if you found yourself in the beautiful city of Las Vegas and you had an extra $100 in your pocket? I bet there's a lot you can stretch $100 in Vegas. You can make it.
I'll take your word for it, Bill.
I went out for some pretty good breakfasts that were under $100 in Vegas. Most of them were liquid breakfasts, but I think you can find a few fun things to do with an extra $100 if you find yourself in Las Vegas. Maybe you're there in mid-February for a pretty big game between those barbecuing Kansas Cityers and those stoners from San Fran. You see I'm circling around this here. Listen, Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. And right now, all users get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket with code VEGAS100, VEGAS 100. And Game Time, obviously, all the same stuff applies as usual. Killer deals, last minute tickets, the all-in prices. When you see the price on Game Time, very underrated thing about them, That's the actual price you're going to pay. They don't hit you with all the fees at the end after you've already decided, I'm doing this. Oh, man, it's going to be an extra $90. What? No, they hit you with everything in the upfront price, and you get the view from your seats and the best price guarantee, man. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You're not going to have to worry, oh, well, what if I find it somewhere cheaper? No, you know the deal. Same section and row. For cheaper, you get 110% of the difference. That's always the case with Game Time. So you got to check them out right now. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get $100 off a big game ticket with code Vegas100. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code VEGAS100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the big game, use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We got anything else today, Charlie?
No, I think that was a very information-filled show, and we have part 2 of our interview with Bob Rotruck, where he will be answering questions on guys like Emil Andre, Ronnie Attard, Elliot Desnoyers. We got it coming for you tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. Our show will be at 3 p.m. So again, we'll probably show that interview around like 3:15ish, and then we'll go into detail on our thoughts on what Bob had to say.
Make sure you're right back here tomorrow for part 2 and yet another episode of PHLY Flyers. This one, as they all are, presented by Mortgage CS. Check out mortgagecs.com/PHLY to start your home buying process today. Company NMLS ID number 1464766. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for hanging out. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter, the podcast. You know all the stuff. My name is Bill Matz for Charlie O'Connor. Have a great Monday, Philly.
We all silly like the mayor.